When I drove up Ridge Hollow Road that morning, the first thing I noticed wasn't the cold or the silence. It was the absence of something I'd expected to see, my father's old boundary stakes. For 30 years they'd marked the edge of his land like quiet sentinels. Now they were gone, replaced by a narrow strip of gravel and a bright green HOA walking trail sign that didn't belong there. People talk about shock like it hits hard, but mine didn't. It settled slowly, like dust drifting into sunlight. I parked, stepped out, and just stared. Pine needles crackled under my boots. The air smelled like thawing earth. The quiet had weight to it, the kind that tells you something isn't right. Dad passed in late 2019. I'd been coming back every few weeks to keep the house alive, fresh air, mowed grass, gutters checked. Routine. Familiar. Predictable. But this wasn't routine. A cart rolled by behind me. Small wheels, plastic frame. I turned in time to see Judy Markham, HOA president, pushing a bright red bin. Her pace slowed when she recognized me. "Well," she said. "You're back." Her tone made the words sound like a warning. "Morning, Judy," I replied. "What happened to the boundary markers?" She followed my gaze but didn't try to act surprised. "Oh, those?" The board updated the common area layout. The trail was approved last year. "Across my property?" She smiled in the way people do when they expect compliance. "Michael, your father gave the HOA a small easement. Years ago. That didn't track. Dad hated giving up even a foot of land. He was a surveyor before he retired, obsessed with precision. The lines mattered to him. They mattered to me. Where's that document?" I asked. "In our records," she said casually. "But you don't need to worry. It's all official." Nothing about her tone felt official. Before I could respond, she tapped the lid of my trash can, lying on its side, scattered debris still rolling in the breeze. "By the way," she added, "some wildlife keeps knocking this over. You should secure it better. The board notices these things." Then she walked off, cart rattling behind her. Wildlife. Sure. I'd already installed a small camera facing the driveway because the bin had been knocked over twice in the past week. Bears didn't wear pastel cardigans. Raccoons didn't walk away with satisfied little smirks. I lifted the can and carried it back toward the garage. A fine line of cracked plastic split across the lid, new damage. My jaw tightened, but outwardly I stayed calm. I've learned that calm is its own pressure, especially in places run by people who expect you to break. Inside the house, it felt colder than usual. I slipped off my boots, set the trash can lid on the counter, and pulled up the footage from the security app. The playback bar loaded slowly. There she was. 5:42 a.m. Judy. Walking straight up the driveway. Looking around once. Shoving the can hard enough to tip it over. Then turning away like nothing happened. No wildlife. I leaned back against the counter. The video kept looping silently, that little grainy moment repeating with an odd steadiness. Instead of anger, something else rose in me, clarity. Small attacks always point to something bigger. I reopened the footage, zoomed in on her posture, her timing, her certainty. People don't risk petty harassment unless they feel protected. Or threatened. Outside, the wind shifted, brushing against the windows like a warning. I checked the old filing cabinet Dad kept in the study. He kept everything: plats, surveys, easements, tax receipts, maintenance logs. Each folder labeled by year, handwriting in his slanted print. But nothing, and I mean nothing, about an easement granted to Ridge Hollow Estates. I paced once, absorbing the details of the room. Dust on the lamp. The faint scent of cedar from Dad's work jacket still hanging on the hook. His level tools arranged with military neatness. Standing there, I realized something unsettling. Dad must have known what was coming. He'd held onto the land with a kind of stubborn vigilance. If he didn't sign anything, someone else had. I stepped outside again, this time with purpose. I walked the trail's new edge, tracing where the markers used to be. Bits of disturbed soil told the story. Someone had pulled them out recently. Not last year. Not months ago. Recently. The new trail gravel was fresh too, maybe a week old. No permit notice posted. No county tags. Nothing required under Colorado Revised Statute Section 38-33.3-302. Nothing legal enough to stand on. A neighbor jogged by, gave me a quick nod, then slowed. Did they talk to you before building the trail? No, I said. He hesitated, checking over his shoulder like he didn't want anyone hearing. They didn't talk to any of us either. What do you mean? He took a breath. Judy says the board approved it. But we never voted. It wasn't in any meeting notes. He kept jogging, leaving his words floating behind him like smoke. Something was wrong. And not wrong in a small way. Wrong in a way that hid inside paperwork. I returned to the house, grabbed a notebook, and wrote a single line across the top. What are they trying to hide? The power flickered gently, a quick, unnatural blink. Ridge Hollow's grid rarely had issues. I stepped out again and scanned the cul-de-sac. Judy was speaking with two neighbors, animated gestures, pointing toward my yard. When she noticed me watching, she shifted her stance like I'd interrupted a secret. A truck from the HOA maintenance crew rolled up. Two workers unloaded a metal stake sign. One held it while the other hammered it into the ground. Trail in use, HOA maintained property. Directly on my father's land. Excuse me, I said, approaching. Who authorized that sign? The younger worker shrugged. Judy. She said this whole area was common space. It isn't. He looked uneasy and stepped back. Sir, we're just following orders. Judy approached then, wearing that same sugary smile. Michael, please don't harass the staff. This is all part of the subdivision's improvement plan. Show me the paperwork. Come to the next meeting, she replied. Everything will be presented. I want to see it now. Her voice dropped, quiet but hard. Michael, don't make this difficult. That was the moment, the exact second, I felt a deep shift. A simple, steady transformation from confusion to resolve. A warmth spread through my chest, not anger but a kind of certainty. I went back inside, grabbed Dad's old binder labeled Property Records, Harlow Lot, placed it gently on the table, and opened a new document on my laptop. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. I hit record on my phone. Day 1, I said. Boundary markers missing. Unauthorized trail. Possible forged easement. HOA president interfering with property. My voice stayed calm, measured, grounded. The camera light reflected faintly in the kitchen window. That's when I decided to document everything. Paper doesn't lie. People do. The first real sign of pressure arrived 2 days later, taped to my front door like a warning flag. A bright yellow slip fluttered in the wind, held down by a line of cheap transparent tape. I peeled it off and read it in silence. Violation notice, trash receptacle placement. Fine, $150. Issued under CRS 38-33.3-302. My hand stayed steady, but I felt something tighten across my ribs. The citation claimed the bin was visible from the street during non-collection hours. That would have been fair, if it were true. But I'd rolled it in at 6 p.m. the night before. I checked my camera again. I had footage of me dragging it in on the exact timestamp they claimed it was still outside. Fabrication. Plain and simple. The morning light hit the paper at an angle that made the text glow faintly. It smelled like cheap toner and cold adhesive. I folded it once, slid it inside my notebook, and sat at the kitchen table. Dad's binder was already open from the night before. I ran my thumb along the spine. His notes were always clear, dated, methodical. Mine would have to be the same. I wrote. Day 3, first false citation. Timeline inconsistent. Video archived. The house felt still, almost expectant. I heard my phone buzz, glanced over, and saw a message from an unknown number. Trash can rules apply to everyone. Cooperate. I stared at the screen for a moment. No emotion rose, just understanding. Someone was trying to escalate quietly, hoping I'd react loudly. I didn't reply. Instead, I stepped outside to breathe. The air carried the faint scent of thawing pine needles. Birds cut across the sky in sharp arcs. Peaceful, if you didn't know what lay beneath it. When I turned back toward the house, I saw her. Judy stood on the sidewalk, hands clasped behind her back. "You got the notice?" she asked. I did. "It's standard procedure," she said. "Nothing personal. I have footage showing the bin wasn't visible." She tilted her head, the way people do when they're calculating. Security footage isn't always reliable. It's time-stamped. Her smile didn't shift. "Then you can bring it to the next meeting. I'm disputing the fine in writing." "You may," she replied, "but the board rarely overturns rulings." "And who is the board?" "Neighbors who care about keeping Ridge Hollow respectable." I held her gaze. She didn't blink. "Have a good day, Michael," she said, turning away. "Just follow the rules and we won't have problems." That last line hung in the air long after she left. I drove to the county office that afternoon. The building smelled like old carpet and recycled air. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. I'd been in enough municipal offices to know that hum, thin, metallic, constant. It matched the tension in my chest. The clerk at the front desk, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, greeted me without much interest. "Property records?" he asked. "Yes." "Ridge Hollow Estates. Harlow Lot." He typed slowly, the keys clicking like soft taps against the silence. "What specifically are you looking for?" he asked. "Any easement granted to Ridge Hollow HOA." He raised an eyebrow. "Should be straightforward." It wasn't. He flipped his monitor around so I could see the file index. "There's a supplemental deed from 2017 granting an easement for recreational access," he said. "Filed under your father's name." My heart tapped once, sharp, controlled. "May I see the document?" He printed it and slid the pages across the counter. The paper was warm from the machine. Dad's signature stared back at me. Except it wasn't his. The letters were too rounded. He always signed with a narrow loop on the H. This version had a wide loop and a slow, shaky exit stroke. Someone imitating him, someone who didn't know the details. I scanned the notary section. The name jumped at me. Notarized by Patricia G. Lasker, license active. I frowned. Patricia Lasker retired in 2013. The clerk nodded slowly. "Yes." She also passed away in 2014. The room suddenly felt colder. Even the hum overhead seemed to thin out. "And yet this document was notarized in 2017, I said quietly. He didn't look surprised. That bothered me more than anything else. "We've had issues with Ridge Hollow paperwork before," he said. "Not many, but enough to make me cautious." I leaned closer. "Was this ever verified?" "No," he said. "If no one disputes it, it stays." I folded the pages neatly. "I'm disputing it." He gave a small nod, almost sympathetic. "Then you'll want a land use attorney. Someone who's dealt with forged filings." Back home, I scanned the documents and cataloged everything. Each file labeled, time-stamped, cross-referenced. I'd learned long ago, organization wins battles before they start. That's when the knock came. Not a gentle tap. A hard, deliberate knock meant to signal authority. I opened the door to find a uniformed HOA compliance officer, not a real officer, just a man in a blue polo with the Ridge Hollow logo stitched on the chest. "You Michael Harlow?" he asked. "Yes." "I'm issuing a secondary citation." "For what?" "Obstruction of common space." I stared at him. "What space?" He pointed toward the gravel trail. This area is maintained by the HOA, and your vehicle was parked too close to the boundary. My truck was parked in my driveway. The board believes the driveway line is under review. I breathed once, slow and measured. Give me the paperwork. He handed me a pink slip and stepped back. His eyes flicked toward Judy's house, then away again. Whatever courage he had wasn't his own. When he left, I unfolded the paper. New fine. Same statute. Same vague justification. No signatures, just initials. I placed it next to the forged easement on the table. Side by side, the pattern was becoming clear. One small push after another. Petty harassment first. Paperwork pressure next. I sat down and dialed a number I'd found hours earlier, a land use attorney named Laura Pena, someone with a reputation for handling boundary disputes and title issues. She answered on the second ring. Pena Law. Ms. Pena, my name is Michael Harlow. I need help with a forged easement and an HOA claiming ownership of part of my land. Which subdivision? Ridge Hollow Estates. She was silent for a moment. I know that HOA. Come in tomorrow at 9. Bring everything. I will. Before hanging up, her voice softened slightly. Mr. Harlow, don't talk to them anymore. Document everything. That community has a history. I closed the notebook and looked out the window. The trail stretched across ground my father had walked for decades. I watched a single piece of gravel roll down the slope, carried by a faint breeze. Pressure reveals motives. And something about Ridge Hollow's calm surface felt engineered, perfect lawns, spotless sidewalks, silent neighbors. Too controlled. I clicked the camera back on. Day 4, I said. Second false citation. Forged easement. County clerk acknowledges inconsistencies. Attorney meeting scheduled. The light blinked softly, recording every word. Fear doesn't grow when truth is in front of you. It shrinks. And then, more quietly. This is just the beginning. By the time I walked into Laura Pena's office, the morning sun had barely cleared the ridge. Her building sat between a hardware store and an old dental clinic, the kind of place where the walls held years of quiet arguments. The waiting room smelled faintly of coffee and dry paper, the scent you get when documents sit too long in a filing cabinet. She stepped out to greet me. Early 40s, hair pinned back neatly, calm eyes that didn't waste time. She shook my hand once, firm, focused. Michael, she said. Bring everything? Every page. Good. Let's get started. Her office was orderly, no clutter, no distractions. Certificates lined one wall, each frame identical. She motioned for me to sit. Tell me what you're dealing with, she said. I handed her the forged easement first. She studied the signature closely, then held it under a small desk lamp. This stroke pattern is inconsistent, she murmured. The H starts with hesitation. Your father didn't hesitate. No, I said. He never did. She compared the notary information next. This notary died in 2014. The filing is 2017. That's our first major flaw. I opened my binder. They removed boundary markers. Built a trail. Issued citations that contradict video evidence. She flipped through my notes quickly. You documented everything. That helps. I wasn't sure what I'd need. You'll need all of it, she said. We're not dealing with incompetence. We're dealing with intent. The word hung in the air like a verdict. She clicked her pen and began outlining steps on a legal pad. Here's how we reverse this, she said. First, quiet title. CRS 38-40-103 lets us challenge any questionable claim to land. Second, an injunction to stop the trail use immediately. Third, notary verification. We'll request a certification from the Secretary of State confirming the notary's date of death. Fourth, chain of title reconstruction. We prove your property line predates the HOA's claim. And the citations? I asked. Keep collecting them. They help show harassment and bad faith. She paused. Did they approach you again? Yesterday. Another false notice. That's good for us, she said, surprising me. Patterns tell stories. Judges listen to patterns. She leaned back, thinking. We'll also need a surveyor. Someone licensed. Someone willing to sign an affidavit. I can get one, I said. Dad knew half the surveyors in the county. Perfect. She closed the folder gently, as if sealing a promise. Michael, this won't be quick. But we can win. I exhaled slowly. I'm ready for slow. She gave a faint smile. Good. Slow wins. By noon, I was driving home with a list of tasks. The wind cut sharply across the road, pushing pine dust across the asphalt. The trail near my house was empty, a narrow scar of gravel pretending to be a community feature. I recorded a quick note on my phone, voice steady. Day 5. Legal strategy initiated. Quiet title. Injunction. Notary verification. Surveyor affidavit pending. Inside, I spread my materials across the kitchen table. Dad's handwriting stared back at me, clean, careful lines marking every corner of the property. His old compass and level lay beside the binder, untouched since the last time he used them. I rested my hand on the tools. Dad, I'm on it, I said quietly. Then I began rewriting the property's chain of title, page by page. Each deed. Each plat. Each revision. The story of land in ink. Halfway through the stack, my email pinged. It was from the HOA. Subject, compliance reminder. Message, unresolved violations may result in escalating action. No signature. No explanation. Just pressure. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked outside to check the gravel trail again. The sun had shifted behind clouds, turning everything gray. A faint crunch broke the silence behind me. I turned to see one of the neighbors, an older man named Keen, slowly approaching. You're Michael, right? He asked. I am. He hesitated, eyes flicking toward Judy's house. Be careful. She doesn't like being challenged. I'm not challenging her, I said. I'm protecting property. He nodded. That's why she'll push harder. You've seen this before? He looked tired, like the story weighed more than he wanted to admit. Years ago, another homeowner questioned fees. She made his life miserable. Letters every week. Anonymous complaints. Eventually he moved. That won't happen this time. He lowered his voice. Most of us know what she's doing. We're just afraid to say anything. Why? She has friends in the county. Friends on the board. Friends who can cause trouble. I studied him. Genuine fear lived in the small tremor of his voice. Thanks for telling me, I said. He nodded once and walked off quietly. Pressure again, subtle, constant. But it helped me understand the landscape. This wasn't just a boundary issue. It was a power system. That evening, I measured the disputed line with a surveyor's tape, marking each point with bright orange flags. Every placement matched Dad's map. Every angle confirmed his work. A low rumble pulled my attention back to the driveway. A dark SUV idled near the sidewalk. The rear window rolled down slightly. I recognized the voice. You're overstepping, Michael. Judy. I walked toward the vehicle. Documenting my land is overstepping? You're creating tension in the neighborhood. I'm uncovering facts. Her voice sharpened. Facts the board already settled. Show me the paperwork, I said. She smiled in that slow, cold way. Some documents aren't meant to be handled by homeowners. That's not how Colorado law works. Her expression flickered briefly, annoyance. Uncertainty? Then the window rolled up, and the SUV pulled away. I watched it disappear around the corner. The air shifted lightly, carrying the scent of damp grass. I bent down, adjusted one of the boundary flags, and recorded another entry. Day 5, evidence growing. Opposition aware. They're watching. Back inside, I emailed Laura the new citation, the neighbor testimony, and a photo of the SUV near the driveway. She called within minutes. "Good timing," she said. I spoke to a clerk. The HOA filed 2 amendments without homeowner approval. Illegal? Yes. Direct violation of CRS 38-33.3-217. If we prove intentional misrepresentation, the court won't hesitate. I exhaled slowly, tension easing a fraction. "There's something else," she added. "Your father may have raised concerns years ago." I found his name in an old county meeting transcript. "What kind of concerns?" "Boundary irregularities. Missing markers." He suspected someone was altering maps. The room felt suddenly smaller. Dad had seen the same patterns, and they'd waited until he was gone. "What do we do next?" I asked. "We prepare." She outlined the plan. Drafting the quiet title complaint. Filing the injunction. Requesting certified notary verification. Scheduling a surveyor for a new affidavit. Preparing exhibits for pretrial review. Every step was slow. Every step was precise. When we finished the call, I sat at the table, lights dim, house quiet. Outside, the gravel trail cut across my father's land like a wound. But the balance had shifted. This wasn't reaction anymore. This was strategy. I opened the notebook and wrote the final line of the day. Patience isn't passive. It's preparation. And I believed it. Because for the first time since this began, the direction had changed. The pressure wasn't pushing me back anymore. I was pushing forward. I walked into the courtroom that morning with a folder tucked under my arm and a calmness I hadn't felt in months. Maybe it was the thin winter air or the quiet echo off the marble floors, but something about the day felt final. Not dramatic, just inevitable, the way a slow-moving storm eventually reaches the valley. Judge Reynolds presided from a raised bench, glasses low on his nose, fingers resting on a stack of motions. He glanced up when we entered. "Parties ready?" he asked. Laura nodded. "For the plaintiff, Your Honor." The HOA's attorney, a polished man named Randall Pierce, stood stiffly. "Ready for the defense." Judy sat behind him, jaw tight, eyes shooting darts at me from across the aisle. For the first time, her confidence looked rehearsed, not natural. She kept smoothing the front of her blazer, a small tell that she wasn't used to losing control. The clerk called the case number. I took a seat beside Laura, my hands steady, breath even. Months of pressure had burned the panic out of me. What was left felt like focus. Judge Reynolds spoke with a dry, patient tone. "This is a quiet title action with related claims of fraudulent filings, unauthorized easement creation, and harassment. We will examine evidence in phases. Ms. Pena, your opening." Laura stood with the ease of someone who lived in courtrooms. "Your Honor, we will show that Ridge Hollow HOA constructed a trail across private land using forged documents, altered county maps, and intimidation against a lawful property owner. We'll present a chain of title, expert surveys, and a notarized death certificate proving the falsified easement could not have been executed legally." Pierce rose quickly, voice inflated. The HOA acted within standard community management practices. Any discrepancies were clerical errors. Laura didn't respond. She didn't need to. The judge motioned. "Begin with the contested easement." Laura handed the first exhibit to the clerk. Plaintiff's Exhibit A. The document appeared on the courtroom screens. I recognized the shaky imitation of my father's signature instantly. "Mr. Harlow," the judge said, "did your father ever mention granting the HOA any easement?" "No, Your Honor," I replied. "He was meticulous about his boundaries." "This signature isn't his." "Objection," Pierce said. He's not a handwriting expert. He's the son, Judge Reynolds said calmly. He can testify to personal knowledge. Laura stepped beside the screen. We also have certified verification from the Secretary of State's office. She clicked to the next slide, an official record. Notary, Patricia G. Lasker. Status, deceased, 2014. The courtroom shifted, soft murmurs, a few raised eyebrows. This easement was notarized in 2017, Laura said. By someone who had been dead for 3 years. The judge turned toward Pierce. Counsel? Pierce swallowed. We request time to review the authenticity. You've had months, the judge said. Proceed, Ms. Pena. Next came the surveyor affidavit. The witness, a steady-handed man named Clark Jenkins, stood at the podium. I performed a full boundary survey, he said. The HOA trail encroaches 26 feet onto Mr. Harlow's property. Pierce cross-examined. You were hired by the plaintiff. Could that influence your findings? Clark didn't flinch. I verified against county plats, state records, and GPS data. Numbers don't have biases. Laura nodded to him, then pulled up a split-screen image, Dad's original plat on one side, the HOA's altered map on the other. The discrepancy was obvious. Boundaries shifted. Lines erased. Metadata timestamps mismatched by years. This altered map, she said, was filed without homeowner approval, without county review, and without public notice, all requirements under CRS 38-33.3-217. Judge Reynolds leaned forward. Mr. Pierce? The HOA attorney's face tightened. Your Honor, these maps were updated for clarity. The board had authority. The board has authority within law, the judge interrupted. Not above it. A silence settled, thick and telling. Next, Laura pulled up the video footage. The lights dimmed slightly as the clip played. Judy, in her cardigan, walking up my driveway, shoving the trash can over with deliberate force. The room held its breath. Laura let the video loop once, then paused it on Judy's face. This, she said, is not wildlife. This is targeted harassment. Judge Reynolds removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Mrs. Markham, care to explain? Judy stood, voice sharp. That footage is out of context. I was checking for damage. By knocking the bin over yourself, the judge asked. Her mouth opened, closed, then tightened. The next exhibit was the series of false citations. Each timestamp matched video evidence contradicting them. Sequence by sequence, Laura showed the pattern, fabricated violations, escalating fines, and a manufactured trail claim built on forged documents. Pierce tried to object twice, but the judge waved him down. Counsel, he said, if your client filed documents notarized by a deceased individual, you are already on thin ice. When the exhibits concluded, Judge Reynolds sat back, fingers steepled. Ms. Pena, he said, do you have anything further? Laura offered one final page. Yes, Your Honor. A county meeting transcript from 2013. Mr. Harlow's father raised concerns about missing boundary markers. He believed someone was altering maps even then. I hadn't seen the transcript until she handed it to the judge. I watched him read it, my father's name, his precise words, his calm warning about property manipulation. He was right, the judge said quietly. A decade early. The room fell into a hush. For a moment, it felt like Dad was standing there beside me, silent but seen. Judge Reynolds straightened. I'm ready to rule. Pierce stiffened. Judy looked down at her hands. This court finds, the judge began, that the easement submitted by Ridge Hollow HOA is fraudulent. The notary's death prior to execution invalidates the document entirely. The court also finds multiple violations of CRS 38-33.3-217, including unapproved amendments, map alterations, and misuse of authority. He turned to me. Quiet title is granted. The land belongs solely to Mr. Harlow. Then to Pierce. Remove the trail. Restore the boundary markers. Cease all enforcement actions immediately. Then, slowly, to Judy. And Mrs. Markham, you are removed as HOA president effective today. Her breath hitched, barely audible but sharp. Judge Reynolds delivered the final line with the weight of something earned, not given. You built your authority on forged ground. Mr. Harlow built his case on truth. I felt the words settle in my chest, not triumph, just certainty. Steady. Honest. Court adjourned. Chairs scraped. Papers rustled. People whispered. As I walked out, Laura touched my arm lightly. You did it. No, I said. The records did. She smiled. Paper doesn't lie. People do, I finished. Outside, the air felt different. Clearer. Warmer. Not victory, just release. Truth had walked out with me. And Ridge Hollow would never be the same. The morning after the verdict, Ridge Hollow felt unfamiliar in a quiet, almost fragile way. No tape notices. No cars idling near my driveway. No sideways glances from the porch across the street. Just clean air drifting through the pines and a stillness that didn't feel staged. For the first time in months, I stepped outside without bracing myself. I walked the length of the boundary slowly. Workers had already removed the gravel trail. The ground looked raw, freshly turned soil, a few scrap pieces of crushed stone scattered in small piles. They'd taken down the signs too. All that remained was the imprint where the posts had stood, a faint rectangular outline, as if the land itself had erased the intrusion. A soft crunch behind me made me turn. It was Keene, hands in his pockets, eyes lowered. Morning, he said. Morning. He nodded toward the empty stretch where the trail had been. Feels different without it. It was never supposed to be here. I know. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. Just wanted to say, thank you. For what? For doing what the rest of us were scared to do. I didn't respond at first. Gratitude was more disquieting than the hostility I'd gotten used to. But he meant it. His voice carried a small tremor, the kind that comes with relief. You'll have a better board now, I said. We already do, he replied. The interim group voted last night. They're rewriting half the policies. That's good. He nodded once, then walked away, leaving me alone with the wind and the settling quiet. Later that day, I found Dad's old toolbox in the garage. I carried it out to the property line. The metal clasps clicked open with the familiar stiffness of age. Inside, everything was arranged exactly the way he'd kept it, surveying pins, fluorescent flags, worn measuring tape, a pencil shaved to a thin edge. I ran a finger over the handle of his hammer, feeling grooves shaped by decades of use. This was where he'd worked. Where he'd measured, remeasured, and recorded every inch. Standing there, I felt his presence in the same calm way I felt the soil beneath my boots, steady, quiet, enduring. I replaced the boundary markers one by one. Each placement felt like a small restoration, a return to order after months of intrusion. The final stake went into the ground with a clean, solid thud. I stepped back. The line looked right again. Not perfect, nothing ever truly returns to the way it was, but honest. A faint breeze carried the scent of pine resin across the yard. I closed my eyes briefly, letting the moment settle. Legacy isn't what you inherit, I murmured. It's what you protect. In the afternoon, the interim HOA board asked to meet. 3 members stood by the curb, none of them people who had backed Judy. Their expressions held a mixture of discomfort and sincerity. A woman named Ruth spoke first. We owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything, I said. Fix the system. That's what matters. We're trying, she replied. We're reviewing every amendment from the last 10 years. Good, I said. Start with the ones she filed alone. Ruth exhaled softly. We're removing all our unauthorized changes. And, we're refunding every fine you paid. I didn't pay any. Even better, she said with a small, rueful smile. The man beside her stepped forward. We'd like your input on updating the enforcement rules. No, I said immediately. They all blinked. I'm not joining the board, I clarified. Not now. Maybe not ever. Just keep things fair. We will, Ruth said. We owe the community that much. They left with quiet steps, their silhouettes shrinking down the street. For the first time since moving back, I didn't feel watched. I felt seen. That evening, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee and watched the sun dip behind the ridge. Orange light spread across the yard, stretching shadows long and thin. The neighborhood was calm, kids on bikes, someone walking a dog, a couple trimming hedges. Normal life, the kind I used to overlook until I almost lost it. My phone buzzed. It was Laura. You holding up? She asked. Better than before. Good. Cases like this take a toll. Thank you, I said. For everything. You did most of the work, she replied. I just translated it into motions. Still, I said. I'm grateful. Her tone softened. You should record a final entry for your documentation. It might help you process everything. I was planning on it. Good. And, Michael, if anything changes, call me. I will. I hung up, took a slow sip of coffee, and watched the last sliver of sunlight fade. Then I picked up the camera. The red light blinked once, reflecting off the porch rail. Final entry, I said. Boundary restored. Trail removed. Fraud exposed. HOA restructured. My voice remained calm, not triumphant, just grounded. The truth came out because the record held. My father's work held. And the law held, once the facts surfaced. I paused, letting the moment breathe. Justice doesn't need noise, I continued. It needs patience. It needs proof. A soft rustle moved through the trees, the sound of leaves brushing against one another. I added, quietly, paper doesn't lie. People do. I clicked the camera off. When darkness settled, I walked the boundary one last time. The stakes glowed faintly in the moonlight, thin silhouettes marking the line my father had trusted me to defend. A small wooden post he'd carved years ago, just our last name, burned into the surface, still stood near the old oak at the corner of the lot. I brushed a hand over the engraving. The wood was smooth, weathered, warm from the day's sun. This is safe now, I whispered. I kept it safe. The wind answered, gentle and steady. I lingered a moment longer, then headed back to the porch. The house lights glowed softly through the windows, the warm kind of light that makes a place feel lived in, not watched. I sat again, letting the night settle around me. No cars passed. No shadows lingered. No footsteps stopped at my door. Just quiet. Honest quiet. Not the kind manufactured by fear or control, just the natural stillness of a place finally breathing again. Before turning in, I spoke one last line into the silence, more to myself than anyone else. Keep your receipts. Because that's how you survive places like Ridge Hollow. That's how you protect what matters. That's how you make sure the truth stands long after the noise fades. And that's how you honor the people who came before you, one documented fact at a time. The first week after the verdict moved slowly, the way time stretches once pressure lifts. I didn't realize how tightly I'd been holding myself until my shoulders stopped aching. There was no sudden celebration, no parade from the neighbors, no grand announcement. Justice rarely arrives with fanfare. It approaches the same way dawn does, quiet, steady, impossible to ignore once it's here. On Monday morning, I stepped outside and saw something I didn't expect. A small crowd near the entrance of Ridge Hollow. People stood in a loose semicircle, talking in low tones, looking toward the community bulletin board. I walked closer. Someone had removed every old HOA notice, the intimidating ones, the rule reminders, the fee schedules written in stern fonts. In their place was a single sheet of clean white paper. Notice: the Ridge Hollow Board has reinstated all original bylaws, effective immediately. Past amendments are void. A full audit of previous actions has begun. Respectfully, the interim board. The crowd murmured, some relieved, some stunned. A few nodded at me, subtle gestures, their expressions softer than before. A woman I'd never met stepped forward. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for standing up. We all saw what was happening. None of us could push back alone." "I didn't do it for praise," I said. "I know," she replied. "That's why it mattered." Her voice held no drama, just sincerity. I appreciated the honesty. When the group dispersed, I stayed behind, looking at the empty spaces where the old notices had once hung. They represented months of pressure disguised as community order. Clearing them out felt symbolic, like the neighborhood was scraping off a layer of old paint. I headed home, passing by the row of mailboxes. Something caught my eye. My bin stood perfectly upright, undisturbed, its lid closed neatly. Such a simple sight, yet it carried weight. Routine had returned, but for the right reasons this time. Later that afternoon, a knock at the door interrupted my notes. I opened it to find Ruth, the new interim chair, holding a slim binder. "We compiled a full timeline of everything Judy filed over the years," she said. "You should see this." I let her in. She placed the binder on the kitchen table. The cover page read: Internal Review, Ridge Hollow HOA. Unauthorized actions / missing approvals / questionable amendments. "Where did you get this?" I asked. "We found it in a locked cabinet at the office," she said. Her private stash. She kept separate records from the official ones. These didn't match anything on file with the county. I flipped through the pages. Dozens of violations surfaced, fines issued without board votes, edits to maps without public hearings, financial transfers without signatures. Some entries were handwritten in shaky script, others typed but time-stamped improperly. "How long was this happening?" I asked. "Longer than any of us realized," Ruth said. She was operating like she owned the subdivision. She didn't. "No," Ruth replied. "But she fooled enough people to act like she did." I closed the binder gently. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," she said. "We just want transparency. If we rebuild trust, we have to start from the truth." It was the first time anyone from the board had used the word truth without sounding rehearsed. She didn't linger. She thanked me again and left, walking down the driveway with a calm stride that didn't feel forced. That evening, I took a slow walk through the neighborhood. Ridges of packed snow lined the edges of the road. Porch lights flicked on as the sky dimmed. Without the constant tension, the community looked different, less guarded, more lived in. As I passed one of the cul-de-sacs, I noticed an elderly man kneeling beside a wilted patch of grass. His rake lay beside him. I recognized him, Tom Gallagher, a quiet resident I'd seen maybe twice. "You all right?" I asked. He looked up, surprised. "Oh. Yes. Just trying to fix this mess." The patch was dead, brittle, shaped oddly, like someone had poured something toxic onto it. "What happened?" I asked. "Got a violation last year," he said. "They claimed this spot was improperly maintained. But it wasn't. I think someone sabotaged it." "Did you tell the board?" "No point then," he said. "But now, maybe." He attempted to stand, but his knee buckled. I stepped forward and offered an arm. He accepted it without hesitation. "Thank you," he said softly. "Judy used to scare people like me. She won't anymore." He smiled faintly. "Because of you." "No," I said. "Because the truth finally caught up." His eyes glistened slightly, not in sadness, but in relief. "People like her think control lasts forever," he said. "It doesn't. Not when records exist." He laughed, a thin, genuine laugh. "Paper never lies." I nodded. People do. He looked at me with a mix of gratitude and exhaustion. Glad someone had the backbone. Someone had to. No, he corrected gently. Someone chose to. I helped him place the rake against the house and continued my walk. Each interaction reminded me that what happened in court wasn't just for me or the land. It shifted something in Ridge Hollow, something subtle, but real. When I returned home, the sky had turned deep blue. I sat on the porch with a fresh notebook and wrote the 6th entry. Documenting aftermath. Community calmer. Systems repairing. Fraud exposed. Harassment ended. I paused, listening to the hum of crickets and the distant sound of a car door closing. A strange thing happens after truth wins, I said quietly to myself. Not celebration. Not triumph. Just clarity. I flipped to a new page. Dad would say legacy doesn't need applause. It just needs protection. I set the notebook down and looked toward the old oak tree at the corner of the lot. Moonlight filtered through the branches, painting thin beams onto the boundary marker. I walked down to it, the grass soft under my boots. The marker stood straight, bright orange against the night. I touched the top lightly, grounding myself. You'd like how this ended, I whispered. A breeze moved through the leaves, making a faint rustle like a quiet acknowledgement. I lingered there, breathing in the cool air, feeling a peace I hadn't known in months. When I finally stepped back onto the porch, I spoke one final line into the dark, not for the camera, not for the evidence, just for the record in my own mind. Justice doesn't disappear when the noise dies down. It stays in the choices people make afterward. I closed the porch light and headed inside. Ridge Hollow felt whole again. And I finally felt at home.